Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. You know how much we love going beyond the surface and unearthing those fascinating stories from Islamic history. And today, we're doing just that. We're going to explore the life of someone you've probably heard of, but maybe only through one specific incident. Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Now we're going to uncover so much more than just that one incident. Using an amazing lecture by Dr. Omar Suleiman as our guide, we're going to dive deep into faith, resilience, honor. All these themes come alive in Abdullah's story, and honestly, I'm really excited to unpack all of this with you.
Me too. Abdullah's story is one that often gets oversimplified. People hear he was blind, and they kind of assume, oh, he must have been from a marginalized background or something.
Yeah.
But that's not the case at all.
Yeah, he was actually related to Khadija, wasn't he? The prophet's wife.
We're cousins, in fact. So that puts him right at the center of prominent Meccan families, the Banu Mazum tribe. And get this, even Abu Jahl, one of the most fierce opponents of Islam, he was from the same tribe.
Wow, so being blind didn't automatically make him an outcast in that society. That's interesting. It makes you wonder, though, how was blindness viewed back then?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the sources don't really focus on, societal perceptions of blindness specifically, but
Yeah.
it's clear that Abdullah's family status gave him a certain level of respect. Even his mother's nickname, Maktoom, meaning mother of the concealed one, referred to as blindness. Without any sense of shame or negativity, it's kind of like foreshadowing the impactful role he'd later play.
Yeah, almost like a hint of the path that was laid out for him. Okay, so he wasn't defined by his blindness. That's really interesting. What about his journey to Islam? Was he an early convert?
Oh, absolutely. Abdullah embraced Islam very early on, even before the House of Arqam became like a central meeting place. So that suggests he was exposed to the message really early.
Yeah, that makes sense. Being close to Khadijah would have given him that direct access to the prophet and this whole new way of thinking. Okay, so let's talk about that pivotal incident that everyone kind of knows him for, the one that led to the revelation of Surah Abasa.
You mean when Abdullah approached the Prophet while he was talking to some influential Meccan leaders?
Yes. It's often described as the prophet being focused on these potential converts and kind of momentarily overlooking Abdullah.
Right, and it's a story that gets used a lot to teach us about treating everyone with respect, no matter who they are or what their abilities are. The Prophet was hoping to influence these leaders, and Abdullah being eager to learn, he kept calling out, "Oh, Muhammad, teach me from what Allah has taught you."
Yeah, and the prophet frowned and turned away. Seems as such a small action. But it led to this powerful divine response, the revelation of Surah Abasa. And it's interesting that this surah directly addresses the prophet. It's not just a general message for the believers, it's like a direct critique.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that true worth comes from piety and righteousness, not from your social status. And it's amazing how this surah, sparked by Abdullah, ended up having this profound impact on how Muslims approach disability. It literally shifted the entire community's worldview. Wow, that's powerful. It's crazy how one small interaction can lead to such a huge shift in perspective. I do wonder, though, what was the reaction of the early Muslims to this revelation?
That's a good question. The sources don't give us a ton of detail on people's immediate reactions, but you can imagine. A direct revelation like this, they would have taken it very seriously.
Oh, for sure. Like a clear instruction from God on how to treat every single person, regardless of how important you think they are. And it's interesting, too, thinking about those Meccan leaders, the ones who were prioritized in that moment, they were all later killed in the Battle of Badr, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how worldly power can be so fleeting and how important humility is. Yeah. While the prophet was focused on these influential figures, it was Abdullah, the one who was seemingly overlooked, who sparked this revelation that guides Muslims to this day.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful reminder to treat everyone with respect and to recognize the potential that each person carries. You just never know who might spark a change that resonates for centuries. Okay, so we've seen Abdullah's journey from Mecca, and now the Muslims eventually migrate to Medina, fleeing persecution. So what role did Abdullah play in this new community, in this burgeoning Muslim community in Medina?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. He became the muadhin for the Fajr prayer.
Wait, the Fajr prayer, the one that depends on seeing the break of dawn. How could a blind man fulfill that role?
That's what makes it so fascinating. Remember, the muadhin is the one who calls the faithful to prayer. And for Fajr, someone had to signal to Abdullah when that first light appeared, so he could make the call. It just shows you how the early Muslim community, they found ways to include people with different abilities.
Yeah, it wasn't just tolerance. It was active inclusion, recognition of his abilities.
Mm,
That's pretty remarkable.
it really is. And it wasn't just symbolic either. The prophet appointed Abdullah to lead prayers, and he even entrusted him with the leadership of Medina 13 times while the prophet was away.
13 times he left a blind man in charge of the entire community. Well, that's a huge responsibility.
It is, and it shows you the level of trust
Yeah.
that the prophet had in Abdullah. It shows that leadership wasn't just about physical abilities. It was about character, knowledge, the ability to guide others.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've seen Ebola in Mecca, we've seen him in Medina, going from being overlooked to being a trusted leader. But his story doesn't end there, does it? Dr. Suleiman mentioned something about the Battle of Qadisiyah. And I gotta admit, I'm really curious. How does a blind man get involved in a battle?
Yes. The Battle of Qadisiyah, this is where Abdullah's commitment to Islam goes beyond Medina. And it's a story that really shows his faith and determination. So the Battle of Qadisiyah, yeah, this was a major confrontation, not just some small skirmish.
Oh, wow. So like a full-on battle.
Absolutely. This was against the Persian Empire, one of the superpowers of the ancient world. I mean, they had a massive army. They were determined to crush the Muslims.
Whoa, that's intense. So knowing this, what did Abdullah do?
Well, he understood his limitations, obviously, but he was so driven to contribute. So he volunteered to be the standard bearer. He knew he couldn't wield a sword, but he could hold the flag, represent the unity of the Muslim army.
Wow, that's powerful. I'm trying to picture that. Like the chaos of a battlefield, swords clashing, and Abdullah standing firm, holding the flag high. But it's more than just a visual, isn't it? What did that role symbolize? For him, for the other soldiers?
You're right. It's so much more than that. The flag, in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
represents the heart of an army. It's a rallying point, a symbol of hope. By holding the flag, Abdullah wasn't just there. He was at the center, the spiritual core of the Muslim forces.
Yeah. It really changes how we think about a valuable contribution, like his presence.
Yeah.
His faith in that moment must have been so inspiring.
Definitely. And the battle raged for 3 days. Just brutal back and forth fighting. The Muslims were outnumbered, but they fought so hard.
And what happened to Abdullah in all of this?
When the battle finally ended, they found him on the battlefield, martyred, still clutching the flag.
Wow.
It's such a powerful image of his unwavering commitment.
It's like his death became a symbol, too. It's almost poetic. From being overlooked in Mecca, to leading prayers in Medina, to standing firm in the middle of battle. What a
Hey.
journey.
It really is. It challenges our ideas about disability,
Mm.
about contribution, about faith. It reminds us there's so many ways to serve, to lead,
Yeah.
to leave your mark.
Absolutely. You know, it's easy to get caught up in these big stories, battles, conquests, but Abdullah's story shows us those individual acts of faith and courage, they're just as important. But I'm curious, what else do we know about his life? Was he just focused on these public roles? Or was there more to him?
That's a great point. It reminds us to look deeper. He lived for years in Medina, and he wasn't just a muadim or an occasional leader.
Yeah.
He was also a teacher
Huh.
and a student.
Oh, so he was involved in the intellectual and spiritual growth of the community.
Definitely. He was eager to learn and to share knowledge. He became known for his understanding of the Quran and his ability to teach it.
It's like his thirst for knowledge never went away, even after the incident with Surah Abasa. Almost like it fueled him even more.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
his blindness, it's almost like it sharpened his other senses.
You could say that.
It makes you think about how we often focus on what people can't do because of a disability. But Abdullah's story changes that whole conversation.
Absolutely.
And let's not forget the impacts of Surah Abasa.
Right.
It reminds us that inclusivity, it's not just about big gestures, it's about how we treat each other every single day.
Yeah. It's about the small things.
The opportunities we give. It's fascinating how that one verse from the Quran, inspired by Abdullah, still guides Muslims today. Dr. Suleiman even mentioned a story about Aisha, the Prophet's wife. She treated Abdullah with so much respect, even years after the Prophet had passed away.
Yeah. It shows the kind of impact he had. He wasn't just a historical figure. He embodied values that shaped the community.
His story really makes you think about how we treat others, about the legacy we leave behind. It's those small acts of kindness, respect, inclusion. They can have a ripple effect for generations. But I'm also wondering, what can we learn from Abdullah's life? That applies to today, to the 21st century.
That's a great question. A perfect way to start thinking about the bigger picture. What lessons can we take from his life that still resonate with us today?
You know, it's incredible to think about. Abdullah never physically saw the Prophet Muhammad, But he had this massive impact on Islam. It really makes you think about what true vision means.
Doesn't it? It's like he pushes us to see beyond just the
Yeah,
physical.
exactly.
Abdullah's real vision was his understanding of the Quran, his
Mm.
connection to the divine.
Yeah. And that shaped how Muslims view inclusivity and dignity. And honestly, that message goes way beyond religion or any time period. It's about recognizing the worth of every single person, regardless of anything else. But how do we actually apply that in our lives? It's easy to admire Abdullah's story, but turning that into action, that's the hard part.
Yeah, that's where the real work starts.
Yeah.
It's about looking inward first, honestly examining our own biases.
Yeah.
Do we prioritize some people over others without even realizing it? Do we really live out inclusivity in our daily lives?
It's like moving past just admiring him and actually challenging those biases we all have,
Exactly.
taking small steps to create a better world.
It doesn't have to be these huge gestures
Yeah.
or policy changes or whatever. It's about how we interact with each other every day,
Right. How we listen, how we acknowledge each other,
the opportunities we provide.
the assumptions we challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about making sure everyone feels seen and heard and valued.
And it's not about lowering standards.
Right.
It's about realizing that everyone has unique potential.
And Abdullah shows us that. People with disabilities have so much to offer.
Absolutely.
Unique perspectives, talents, abilities.
I mean, think about him as a teacher. He couldn't physically see his students, but he connected with them on a whole other level, sharing his knowledge, inspiring them by just being himself.
His life is truly inspiring. It shows us the power of resilience, determination, faith,
And it challenges us to actually cultivate those qualities in ourselves.
and in our communities, to build a world where everyone has the chance to contribute, to learn, to grow.
Like Abdullah did. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about this. How can you embody those values of inclusivity and respect in your own life? What steps can you take, even small ones, to create a better world?
What a powerful question. And remember, just like Abdullah's persistence led to a huge change in Islamic teachings, our own actions, even the small ones, can create change too. They can have a lasting impact.
Well said. It's been an honor talking about Abdullah with you today.
Likewise. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us. May Abdullah's story inspire us all to be more compassionate, more inclusive, more committed to building a world where everyone can thrive. Until next time.